I still remember the exact moment I realized I'd been betrayed. The fluorescent lights of the conference room buzzed overhead as I stood frozen in the doorway. There was Derek, my boss, standing at the head of the table, surrounded by investors, pointing at my code on the screen. My code. My late nights. My breakthrough algorithm that I'd spent 18 months perfecting. As the creator of this fraud detection system, Derek announced, his voice dripping with pride, I can guarantee it will revolutionize fintech security. My stomach dropped. The executives nodded, impressed. One of them mentioned something about genius-level work. I watched as Derek soaked up their praise like a sponge, never once mentioning my name, not even as a contributor. After the meeting, I cornered him in the hallway. That's my work, I said, my voice shaking. You know I built that entire system. Derek's smile vanished. He glanced around to make sure we were alone, then leaned in close. Look, Tessa, you're just an assistant coder. I refined your mess into something valuable. He straightened his expensive tie and added, Know your place. The adults are talking. As he walked away, my phone buzzed. An HR email. Performance review, urgent. The HR office felt smaller than usual, with its beige walls closing in around me. Marissa, the HR director, sat across from me, her face a practiced mask of professional concern. Tessa, Derek has some concerns about your recent performance and attitude, she said carefully. I took a deep breath. He's presenting my work as his own. I have proof, Git commits, timestamps, emails. Marissa cut me off with a raised hand. Tessa, this is exactly the emotional behavior he mentioned. All company work belongs to the company. But he's filing a patent under his name only. You seem confused about your role here, she interrupted, making a note in my file. Perhaps you're under some stress? I recognized the technique immediately. Corporate Gaslighting 101. Make the victim question their reality. Label them as emotional or unstable. That night, a text came from Marco in engineering. Watch your back. Heard Derek asking about replacement costs for your position. I sat in my dark apartment, laptop glowing in front of me. They thought I was just some replaceable coder. They had no idea who they were messing with. I opened my home server and started downloading everything. My home workspace hummed with energy as I pulled up file after file. Most people don't realize that good coders leave digital fingerprints everywhere. I had receipts, thousands of them. Every Git commit with timestamps, every Slack message discussing the algorithm, Zoom recordings where Derek asked me questions about how my system worked. The original design sketches on my tablet from 18 months ago. I organized everything meticulously, creating a timeline that proved beyond doubt that the fraud detection system was my creation. And then I found it. The smoking gun. In his rush to claim my work, Derek had reused chunks of my code without checking for my digital signature. There, buried in the function declarations, was my personal marker. TBV 1.0, Tessa Blake, version 1.0. I laughed out loud in the silence of my apartment. Derek, with his MBA and his smooth talk, didn't understand the first thing about software architecture or security. He certainly didn't understand who he was stealing from. The next day, a calendar invite appeared in my inbox. Severance and transition planning, confidential. So that was it. They were firing me to protect their theft. Fine. Let them think they've won. I sat across from Marissa and Derek, my face carefully blank as they explained my separation. Derek couldn't quite meet my eyes as he droned on about company direction and team alignment. 6-week severance for 11 months of groundbreaking work that would make him millions. We'll need you to sign this agreement, which includes standard non-disclosure and non-compete clauses, Marissa said, sliding a thick document across the table. I skimmed it, noting the restrictions that would prevent me from working in fintech for 2 years. They were trying to sideline me completely. I understand, I said quietly, playing the defeated employee. Can I take this home to review before signing? They exchanged glances. Of course, Derek said, relief evident in his voice. He thought I was giving in. That night, while they celebrated removing the final obstacle to their fraud, I registered a new business entity, Swan Systems LLC. I incorporated it through a series of digital proxies, untraceable to me. The company description was simple: next-generation financial security solutions. I just planted the seed of Derek's destruction, and he'd never see it coming. My severance would last 6 weeks. I had work to do. I transformed my apartment into a coding fortress. Monitors lined my desk, empty energy drink cans accumulated. Day and night blurred together as I rebuilt my software from scratch, not just replicating it, but enhancing it beyond what Derek had stolen. Every piece I coded was stronger, faster, more elegant. The machine learning algorithms were more sophisticated. The user interface was cleaner. I added features I'd always wanted to implement but never had time for under Derek's rushed deadlines. But most importantly, I embedded proof of origin throughout the architecture. Digital watermarks, hidden signatures, references that only I would recognize. If someone ever compared this code to what Derek had stolen, there would be no doubt which came first. As dawn broke on the 6th straight day of coding, I discovered a critical vulnerability in Derek's version, one he would never notice until it was too late. The system mishandled certain transaction patterns under specific loads, a flaw that wouldn't surface in testing but would catastrophically fail in a real-world environment. I smiled as I fixed it in my version. Then I set myself an encrypted reminder. Don't warn them. I remembered Derek's one contribution to my code, a redundant authentication function he'd insisted on keeping. It's a security failsafe, he'd claimed, though it slowed the system and added nothing. Typical Derek, always making things worse while claiming improvement. Now, that useless function would become my Trojan horse. I carefully crafted what programmers call a time bomb, a recursive overflow flag that would activate only under specific high-volume transaction patterns. Banks wouldn't encounter these conditions during normal testing, but they would emerge once the system ran in production with real financial data. I didn't sabotage the code. I wouldn't risk people's financial security. Instead, I designed the flag to trigger harmless but spectacular false positives. Legitimate transactions would get incorrectly flagged as suspicious, thousands of them, all fixable but highly visible. It would expose the fundamental flaws in Derek's stolen system without causing actual damage. The best part? The trigger would only activate after 3 months, long after Derek had sold licenses to major banks and fintech companies, but right before his system would be fully integrated into their infrastructure. Systems failure in 90 days, I whispered to my empty apartment. Countdown begins. With my severance running out, I needed to establish my new identity. I overhauled my LinkedIn profile, changing my title to Independent Security Consultant and my focus to blockchain and encryption. Nothing that would alert Derek I was still in fintech. I took small freelance jobs to maintain appearances, website security audits, basic encryption tasks. Meanwhile, Black Swan systems developed in the shadows. I applied to a women in tech startup incubator under my company name, not my own, and got accepted based on my technical outline alone. The mentor assigned to me, Layla Chen, was a veteran software architect. When I demonstrated my fraud detection system, her eyes widened. "This is beyond impressive," she said. "The neural network approach to identifying pattern anomalies, I've never seen it implemented so elegantly." "It's been my focus for nearly 2 years," I replied carefully. "Well, it's revolutionary," Layla said. "You should patent this immediately." I smiled. "Already in process." 3 days later, I received an email to Black Swan's anonymous business account. Urgent inquiry about fraud detection solutions. The sender? Core Trust Financial, one of Derek's biggest new clients. The FinTech Security Conference was a risk, but I couldn't resist. I wore glasses I didn't need and styled my hair differently. Derek wouldn't recognize me. He'd barely looked at me during our months working together. I sat in the back row as he took the stage, watching him swagger to the podium in his designer suit. The projected slides behind him displayed screenshots of my interface with his logo plastered across them. "Our proprietary detection algorithm," he boasted, "can identify fraudulent patterns that other systems miss entirely." The next slide showed a snippet of code, my code, that he was using to illustrate his breakthrough. I nearly laughed out loud. The idiot had included one of my early bugs, which I'd later fixed. He didn't even understand the code well enough to know he was showcasing a flaw. I slipped out before the Q&A and checked my monitoring dashboard. The clock was ticking. In just 5 days, banks would begin processing end-of-month transaction volumes that would trigger my failsafe. Derek's downfall was programmed and inevitable. I wondered if he'd feel the earth shifting beneath him, or if he'd be too busy buying another Tesla to notice. Black Swan Systems launched with no fanfare, just a sleek website, detailed white papers, and a free trial download. I wanted the product to speak for itself. Within hours, posts appeared on developer forums. Anybody tried Black Swan's detection system? It's catching patterns our current provider misses completely. Just ran parallel tests. Black Swan flagged 17 real fraud attempts our system missed. Who are these people? Their architecture is next level. It's like they're 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the field. I monitored the discussions from my apartment, smiling as tech leads from major financial institutions began downloading the trial. This wasn't about marketing. This was about superior technology finding its audience. By evening, my anonymous business email received a direct message from the CTO of Eastern Regional Bank, one of Wall Street's oldest institutions. Your system just prevented what would have been a $2 million fraudulent wire transfer that our current solution missed completely. We need to talk immediately. Who exactly is behind Black Swan? I replied professionally, keeping my identity hidden. We're a team of security specialists focused solely on next-generation fraud protection. When would you like to discuss implementation options? The first domino was tipping. Monday morning, 9:13 a.m. My phone buzzed with news alerts faster than I could read them. Breaking. Major banks reporting system-wide fraud detection failures. Financial institutions face massive transaction delays as security systems crash. TechSecure's fraud prevention platform triggering false alarms across banking sector. TechSecure, Derek's company name for my stolen software. Right on schedule, the time bomb had detonated. I watched real-time reports flood in. Chase, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, all experiencing catastrophic false positives from Derek's system. Legitimate transactions frozen. Customer accounts flagged incorrectly. Banking apps sending thousands of fraud alerts for normal purchases. Derek must be panicking. His developers would be scrambling, searching desperately through code they didn't write or understand, trying to find the source of the failures. I opened my laptop and triggered the automated email I'd prepared weeks ago. Black Swan Systems sent identical messages to the technology officers at every affected institution. We've identified the vulnerability in TechSecure's implementation. Black Swan System is immune to this issue due to our proprietary pattern recognition approach. We can offer immediate migration with zero downtime and full data integrity, available for emergency consultation. By noon, my business line was ringing nonstop. Derek's professional downfall was brutal and public. His name trended on Twitter alongside hashtags like #TechSecureFail and #FraudDetectionFraud. Former employees, emboldened by his vulnerability, began sharing stories of his technical incompetence and management failures. A leaked email from his development team revealed their panic. We can't find the source of the cascading failures. The architecture is too complex, and we don't have complete documentation. Of course they didn't. The only person who fully understood the system was me. Meanwhile, Black Swan Systems' client list exploded. 28 major financial institutions signed emergency contracts within 36 hours. My migration protocol made the transition seamless, a one-click process that preserved all their historical data while instantly stabilizing their fraud detection. I watched from my apartment as Derek made a desperate appearance on CNBC. Sweating through his expensive shirt, he promised, "This is a minor technical issue that we're resolving immediately." The stock price of his newly public company told a different story, down 42% and falling. That night, I began preparing my next move. It wasn't enough for Derek to lose his clients. It was time for the world to know exactly what he had done. I'd been following Cara Bell's investigative tech journalism for years. She had a reputation for exposing fraud in Silicon Valley with surgical precision. Her recent series on gender discrimination in tech had gone viral and forced several high-profile resignations. From my anonymous email, I sent her a carefully curated selection of evidence, just enough to pique her interest. Screenshots showing identical code between TechSecure's product and my early prototypes. Timestamps proving I'd created the functions months before Derek claimed to have invented them, and a redacted email where Derek instructed the patent attorney to file under his name only. I kept my identity hidden, signing only as the real developer. Her response came within an hour. This is explosive if verifiable. I need more concrete evidence and a direct conversation. Can we talk? I agreed to a signal call using voice disguising software. For 2 hours, I walked her through the technical details of the theft, my role in developing the original system, and Derek's systematic effort to erase me from the project. Holy hell, she said when I finished. If this is real, and based on the technical details I believe it is, this is the biggest intellectual property theft case I've seen in years. I have more, I replied, much more. I sent Kara everything. Side-by-side code comparisons showing how Derek's proprietary algorithm was an exact copy of my work, down to my personal commenting style. Git repository logs with timestamps. Early design documents with my digital signature. The most damning evidence was audio from a meeting I'd recorded, where Derek explicitly stated, "We'll file the patent under my name. She's just the dev who helped implement my vision. No need to complicate ownership." The article went live at 6 a.m. The Invisible Woman Behind a Billion-Dollar Lie, How TechSecure's revolutionary software was stolen from its actual female developer. Kara's piece was meticulous, technically sound, and devastating. She outlined how Derek had systematically stolen my work, filed for patents he had no right to claim, and built his entire company on intellectual property theft. She didn't name me, at my request, referring only to a female engineer whose groundbreaking work was appropriated without credit or compensation. The article included enough technical details to establish credibility with the developer community, while explaining the situation clearly enough for non-technical readers to understand the magnitude of the theft. By noon, it had been shared over 50,000 times. The Invisible Woman was trending on every platform. Reddit threads analyzed the code snippets from Kara's article, with developers confirming that the same person had clearly written both versions. Hacker News exploded with discussions about intellectual property rights in software development. A hashtag emerged. Who is Tessa? Someone had found my name buried in one of the screenshots and connected the dots. I watched with a mixture of anxiety and satisfaction as internet sleuths pieced together my professional history, my brief employment at Derek's company, and my abrupt departure. Derek's response was panic. His company issued a cease and desist letter to Kara's publication, claiming the article contained malicious falsehoods and proprietary company information. The legal threat only poured gasoline on the fire. Tech blogs picked up the story, framing it as a powerful man trying to silence journalism that exposed his fraud. 3 former colleagues contacted me directly, offering to go on record about how Derek had taken credit for my work. The wall of silence was crumbling. That evening, my encrypted phone rang. A woman's voice, sharp and confident. "Miss Blake? This is Maya Renner. I specialize in intellectual property theft cases, particularly in tech. I think we should talk." Maya Renner's reputation preceded her. A former software engineer turned attorney, she had won landmark cases against tech giants who stole from smaller developers. Her Yale law degree and background in computer science made her uniquely qualified to understand both the technical and legal aspects of my case. We met in a private room at her law office. Her eyes were sharp behind stylish glasses as she reviewed my evidence. "This is one of the clearest cases of IP theft I've seen," she said, looking up from her tablet. "The code signatures alone are compelling, but the audio recording where he explicitly states his intention to file the patent under his name, that's a slam dunk." "What are my options?" I asked. "We file a comprehensive intellectual property lawsuit immediately. We challenge his patents. We seek damages for theft of your work and lost compensation." She leaned forward. "But more importantly, we can prove you are the true owner of this technology." "He has millions for legal defense," I pointed out. Maya smiled, a predator's smile. "Yes, but you have the truth, and I'm very, very good at what I do." She closed her tablet. "You built this. He stole it. Let's torch him." For the first time since this all began, I felt a weight lift. I had a champion. I had a plan. And Derek? He had no idea what was coming. The lawsuit hit like a meteor. Software engineer sues TechSecure's CEO for intellectual property theft, valued at $200 million. Every business and tech publication ran the story. Maya's legal filing was masterful, 139 pages of detailed evidence, technical analysis, and damning testimony from former employees who had watched Derek claim my work. The court documents included a complete technical comparison that even a non-technical judge could understand, showing exactly how he had appropriated my code. Investors panicked. TechSecure stock plummeted another 60% as shareholders filed for emergency meetings. The SEC announced a preliminary investigation into whether Derek had misrepresented the company's intellectual property assets to investors, a potential securities fraud charge. Derek appeared on Bloomberg, looking haggard. "These accusations are completely false," he insisted. "This is a disgruntled former employee trying to extort money from a successful company." The interviewer was prepared. "But what about the code comparisons showing identical structures and even personal signature markers? And the recorded meeting where you explicitly stated you would file patents for her work under your name?" Derek's face went blank. He hadn't expected this level of detail. "I can't comment on pending litigation," he stammered before ending the interview. That evening, Maya called. "He's trying to settle. $2 million if you drop everything and sign an NDA. I laughed. Not a chance. Carabelle's livestream interview was watched by over 4 million people. I sat across from her in a studio, finally showing my face to the world as the creator behind both the failed TechSecure system and the triumphant Black Swan solution. "Walk us through how you discovered your code had been stolen," Kara prompted. I described finding my personal digital signatures still embedded in Derek's supposedly original code. I explained, in terms viewers could understand, how I had documented everything from the beginning, anticipating that my work might someday need protection. The fundamental flaw in TechSecure's system, the one causing all these banking issues, was it a deliberate sabotage? Kara asked. Not sabotage, I clarified. It was a vulnerability that existed in the original code Derek took. I discovered and fixed it in Black Swan's version, but since he doesn't actually understand the architecture, he never identified it. That's the danger of stealing complex systems you don't comprehend. The interview humanized me while establishing my technical credibility. By the end, viewers understood that this wasn't just about a greedy boss. It was about the systematic erasure of contributions from those deemed less important. The next morning, 3 major venture capital firms reached out to Black Swan Systems, seeking meetings. Derek's empire crumbled with stunning speed. Key partners terminated their contracts, citing the ongoing legal and technical concerns. Former employees broke their NDAs to confirm that I had indeed built the core technology. Class action lawsuits from investors began to form, claiming they had been misled about the company's intellectual property. I received a formal request to testify before a congressional subcommittee on intellectual property protections in the digital economy. The notice mentioned that Derek had also been summoned. We would be testifying on the same day. Maya advised me to accept. "This takes your case beyond a private dispute into public policy territory. It's an opportunity to advocate for better protections for all developers." Meanwhile, Black Swan Systems continued to thrive. Our client list included 9 of the 10 largest financial institutions in the country. The system performed flawlessly, catching fraud patterns that other solutions missed completely. I hired a small team of brilliant engineers, many of whom had been overlooked or undervalued at previous companies. I made sure everyone received proper credit for their contributions and implemented a patent policy that included all developers as named inventors. We were building something revolutionary, not just in technology, but in how tech companies could operate with integrity. Derek's fall was spectacular. The board removed him as CEO in an emergency session. The company's stock had lost 87% of its value since the crisis began. Lawsuits from clients, investors, and even his own executives piled up as everyone scrambled to distance themselves from the fraud. I watched from my new office as news broke that his mansion had been listed for sale. A week later, paparazzi caught photos of his Tesla being repossessed from the company parking lot. His Forbes profile was amended with an editor's note about the ongoing intellectual property dispute, then removed entirely. He tried desperately to rebrand himself, launching a podcast about entrepreneurial resilience. It lasted 3 episodes before sponsors pulled out, unwilling to be associated with his tainted name. I felt no joy in his personal destruction, only a sense of justice being served. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences for theft and fraud on a massive scale. In a final humiliation, the Patent Office formally invalidated all of Derek's claims, citing clear prior art and misrepresentation of inventorship. The intellectual property he had stolen was officially no longer his. Maya called with an update. His legal team is in shambles. 3 lawyers have quit. He's running out of options and money. On a rare free afternoon, I visited the small co-working space where I'd written the first lines of my fraud detection algorithm. It was still there, with its mismatched furniture and perpetually broken coffee machine. I sat at an empty desk, remembering the excitement of those early days. I'd been so proud of the system I was building. I'd stayed late, worked weekends, poured my heart into creating something revolutionary. I believed Derek when he promised recognition, equity, a real partnership. In my bag was a framed photo I'd kept from those days, our original development team. 6 people were named and credited in the caption. My name was missing, despite being central to the project. At the time, I'd told myself it was an oversight. Now I recognized it as the first sign of what was coming. The missing credit, the canceled meetings, the gradual exclusion from decision-making, all leading to that final betrayal in the conference room. I placed the photo on the desk, studying Derek's confident smile. He'd never created anything of value himself. His only skill was taking credit for other people's brilliance. Never again, I whispered to myself. I left the photo on the desk and walked out, back toward the future I was building, one where credit went where it was earned. The private equity firm's offer was direct, $50 million for a controlling stake in Black Swan Systems. The partners sat across from me in a sleek conference room outlining how they could take the company to the next level. I listened politely, asking detailed questions about their vision, their plans for the technology, and their approach to the team. Their answers focused entirely on market capture and profit maximization. And the development team, I asked, would they retain credit and equity for their contributions? The lead partner hesitated. We typically restructure technical teams for efficiency. The IP would transfer to the holding company, of course. Just like Derek, I thought. Different packaging, same exploitative core. Thank you for your interest, I said, standing up. But Black Swan isn't for sale. We're building something different. That afternoon, I interviewed 3 former employees from TechSecure, all women who had been sidelined or pushed out after raising concerns about credit and compensation. Each brought unique skills and perspectives. I hired all 3, offering competitive salaries and significant equity. I want to be clear, I told them. At Black Swan, you'll own your work. Your names will be on the patents. Your contributions will be recognized. That's non-negotiable. The look of grateful disbelief on their faces confirmed I was building the company I wished had existed when I started my career. Derek's email arrived late at night, a digital white flag of surrender. Tessa, I'm ruined. The house is gone. Savings depleted by legal fees. My reputation is destroyed. I'm facing potential criminal charges for the investor misrepresentations. Can we talk? Just make this stop, please. Name your price. Derek. I read it 3 times, searching for any hint of genuine remorse or acknowledgement of what he'd done. There was none, just self-pity and desperation. He wasn't sorry for stealing my work. He was sorry he got caught. I forwarded the email to Kara with a brief note. Thought you might find this interesting. Use it if you want. Then I drafted a brief reply to Derek. There is no price. This isn't about money. It's about truth and consequences. I didn't destroy your career. Your choices did, Tessa. I never sent it. He didn't deserve even that much of my attention. Instead, I closed my laptop and turned to the whiteboard where I was mapping out Black Swan's next innovation, a system that would help small businesses protect themselves from the very type of fraud Derek had committed. The best response wasn't words. It was building something better than he could ever steal. The federal courthouse was imposing, all marble and gravity. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Maya, watching as Derek and his remaining legal team took their places across the aisle. He looked smaller somehow, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame, dark circles under his eyes. Maya was magnificent, With scientific precision, she laid out the timeline of my work, the documented evidence of theft, and the deliberate fraud Derek had perpetrated on investors and clients. She projected side-by-side code comparisons on the courtroom screen, highlighting my embedded signatures that still existed in his stolen version. When Derek took the stand, he attempted to portray himself as the visionary leader who had merely directed the development. Maya systematically dismantled his claims, forcing him to admit he couldn't explain basic functions in the very code he claimed to have conceived. "Mr. Hale," she asked calmly, "can you tell the court what this function does?" She displayed a core algorithm I had written. He squinted at the screen. It processes the transaction data through the filtering system." "That's incorrect," Maya replied. "This is the neural network training module that Ms. Blake personally developed. The function you described is entirely different." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant is claiming authorship of code he fundamentally does not understand." Derek's face flushed with humiliation. He had no response. The judge's ruling was decisive. Full ownership of all disputed intellectual property reverted to me, along with $18.6 million in damages and lost earnings. Justice, at last. I stood across the street from TechSecure's former headquarters, a gleaming glass tower that had once represented Derek's stolen success. Now it stood mostly empty, a for-lease sign hanging in the lobby. After the lawsuit, the company had downsized to a small office park on the edge of town, struggling to rebuild with licensed technology after losing rights to my code. 3 months later, I had made a decision that surprised even Maya. Black Swan Systems purchased the building at a steep discount. It would become our new headquarters as we expanded to meet global demand. As I walked through the empty offices where Derek had once held court, I felt no triumph or gloating, only a sense of things coming full circle. This space, once filled with lies and theft, would be transformed into something authentic and innovative. In the main lobby, workers were installing a large plaque, Black Swan's new company values, prominently displayed for every visitor to see. "We build. We don't steal. We credit all contributions. We value integrity over image. We protect what we create." I ran my fingers over the words, feeling their weight. This wasn't just about reclaiming a building. It was about changing the culture that had allowed Derek to thrive in the first place. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Judge denied his appeal. It's really over." I smiled, looking up at the space that was now truly mine. "No," I whispered. "It's just beginning." The conference hall was packed for my keynote at the Women in Technology Summit. A year had passed since the lawsuit concluded. Black Swan Systems had grown to over 200 employees, with a valuation exceeding $1 billion. More importantly, we'd established a new standard for ethical technology development and proper attribution of intellectual contributions. I looked out at the sea of faces, developers, engineers, founders, students, all focused intently as I shared my journey from betrayal to vindication. "The greatest theft in tech isn't just code or algorithms," I told them. "It's the systematic erasure of contributions from those deemed less important. It's taking someone's brilliance and stamping someone else's name on it. And it happens every day." I paused, looking at the young women in the audience, the future of our industry. To every coder who is ever overlooked, undervalued, or erased, you are not invisible. Your work matters. Your name deserves to be on what you create, and you have more power than they want you to know. The applause began slowly, then built to a standing ovation that echoed through the hall. As I stepped away from the podium, I caught sight of my original notebook in my bag, the one where I'd first sketched the fraud detection system that changed everything. I closed the notebook and smiled. This chapter was complete, but the story was just beginning.